The rain came down in thick sheets that Tuesday night, turning the streets outside Silver Creek Diner into rivers of reflected neon light. Emma Calloway wiped down the counter for the fourth time that hour and watched the water pour off the awning like a curtain. It was past midnight. The diner had 3 customers left: a truck driver nursing his third coffee at the far booth, an older woman picking at a slice of lemon pie, and the quiet hum of the refrigerator behind the counter that had been her company through hundreds of nights just like this one. She had worked the closing shift at Silver Creek for 2 years. Her feet knew every crack in the linoleum floor. Her hands moved through the routine of refills and receipts and wiping and restocking, without her mind needing to direct them at all. That left her mind free to do what it always did during slow hours, which was calculate. Tuition at Riverside Community College was $14,000 for the nursing program. She had $4,312 in her savings account. She was getting closer. Every shift, every tip, every dollar she did not spend on anything beyond rent and groceries brought her closer to the version of her life she could actually picture, the one where she wore scrubs instead of this faded blue uniform and helped people in a way that felt permanent rather than temporary. The bell above the door chimed. Emma looked up, expecting another delivery driver seeking shelter. But the man who walked in did not look like anyone who usually stumbled into Silver Creek Diner at midnight on a Tuesday. He was tall, somewhere in his early 30s, and soaked straight through a dress shirt that had probably cost more than her rent. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead. His jaw was tight, his eyes carrying the particular blankness of someone who had just received news that rearranged everything. He stood in the doorway for a moment, like he was not entirely sure how he had gotten there. Looking around at the cracked vinyl booths and the handwritten specials board and the little plastic flower centerpieces on each table, as though he had arrived in a country whose customs he did not know, Emma came around the counter with a menu tucked under her arm. She had a practiced warmth for customers that was neither fake nor overly familiar, just the steady, reliable kindness of someone who understood that people came to diners at midnight for reasons that had nothing to do with the food. She gestured toward the booth nearest the window, away from the truck driver, and set a menu down on the table. "Coffee while you look?" she asked. He sat down slowly, the way exhausted people do, as though the weight of sitting was actually the weight of stopping. "Please," he said. His voice was low and a little rough around the edges. She poured his coffee and left him alone. She did not hover. She had learned early on that hovering was the worst thing you could do for a person who needed a moment to breathe. She refilled the truck driver's cup, checked on the woman with the lemon pie, and gave the man by the window 5 full minutes before she came back. "You need anything else, or just the coffee for now?" she asked. He looked up from the menu he had not actually been reading. "What's good here?" Emma considered the question seriously. "The biscuits are real. Patrice, the woman who owns this place, she makes the gravy from scratch every morning. If there are any biscuits left, that's what I'd have at midnight." Something in his expression loosened very slightly at her directness. "Then I'll have that." She put the order in and came back to refill his cup when it was half gone, which did not take long because he drank his coffee like it was something functional rather than enjoyable. Up close, without the distraction of figuring out how out of place he was, she noticed that he looked genuinely hollow. Not tired the way her customers were tired after long drives or double shifts. Hollow in the way that meant something inside had recently gone quiet. She was not the kind of person to ask strangers about themselves. People told you what they wanted you to know, and if they did not say anything, that was information too. But when she set the biscuits down in front of him, he looked at the plate and then looked at her and said, almost to himself, "I was supposed to get married in 6 weeks." Emma sat down across from him. Not because it was protocol, because Silver Creek had no protocol, but because she had learned there were moments when sitting down was the right thing to do. "What happened?" she asked, and she meant it, which he must have heard in her voice because he actually answered. "She called it off this evening," he said. "In front of a room full of people at a charity event." He paused, picking up the fork. "I'm not even sure which part bothers me more, the audience or the fact that I'm mostly just tired instead of heartbroken." Emma thought about that. "Maybe being tired is honest," she said. Maybe it means some part of you already knew it was not right. He looked at her. He had pale gray eyes that were sharper than the rest of his face, the kind of eyes that were used to processing information quickly. You're a philosopher, he said, and it was not unkind. I'm a waitress, she said. But I've heard a lot of people talk at this hour of the night. You hear patterns after a while. He ate slowly, which she took as a good sign. People who were truly in crisis could not eat. He was past the worst of it, working his way through the aftermath. She brought him more coffee and a slice of the lemon pie because it was almost gone, and she thought he could use something sweet, whether or not he ordered it. He looked at the pie. I didn't order this last piece, she said, and it's better than it looks. He took a bite, and his expression confirmed that she was right. She smiled and went back to closing up the rest of the counter. When the truck driver left and the older woman gathered her purse and coat and headed out into the rain with a small wave, the diner went quiet except for the refrigerator hum and the sound of rain. The man by the window had not given his name. Emma had not asked. She cleaned around him without rushing him out, the way Patrice had always done. Because Patrice said a diner at midnight was the last honest sanctuary left in the city, and she was not going to turn it into somewhere. That made people feel like a burden. Around 1 a.m, he set down his fork and looked at the table, and then out at the rain, which had slowed to something gentler. Thank you, he said, with a weight behind the words that made Emma understand he was not talking about the pie. Any time, she said, and she meant that too. He left cash on the table, more than Emma had ever received from a single customer at Silver Creek, and walked back out into the wet night without leaving a name. Emma cleared the table and counted the bills and stood very still for a moment with them in her hand. Ted came out of the back carrying a mop and looked at her face. What happened to you? He asked. Nothing, Emma said. But she looked out at the dark window for a long moment before she put the cash in her apron pocket, and she thought about gray eyes and the particular kind of loneliness that money does not touch. And she thought it was strange how a person could walk into your ordinary Tuesday night and make everything feel slightly different without doing anything at all. She finished closing. She locked the door. She walked home in the rain, which had become almost soft by then, and she thought about nursing school and her savings account and the life she was building dollar by dollar. And she also thought, quietly and without quite meaning to, about whether he would come back. Cole Prescott came back the following Thursday. Emma was restocking the sugar caddies when the bell above the door chimed at 11:45 at night, and she looked up and recognized him before she recognized why she recognized him. He was dressed differently this time, no ruined dress shirt, just a dark jacket over a simple gray shirt, but his posture was the same and his eyes were the same. That pale, sharp gray that seemed to be doing quiet calculations. Even when the rest of his face was still, he sat in the same booth. She brought him coffee without being asked. And he looked at the cup and then at her and said, You remembered you sat in the same seat, she said. Fair point. She brought him the biscuits again because Patrice had made a fresh batch that morning and there were still 4 left in the warmer. He did not protest this time. He ate and she worked, and somewhere in between she found herself back at his table talking. Not because the diner was slow, though it was, but because the conversation from Tuesday night had the particular quality of something unfinished. His name. She learned that second visit was Cole. He did not offer a last name, and she did not push. He learned her name was Emma, and that she was saving for nursing school, and that she had been raised by her grandmother, Patrice, who was also the woman who owned the diner, which made his eyebrows lift in a way that was almost funny. You work for your grandmother, he said. She's the best boss I've ever had, Emma said, which was true, and the worst, because she knows everything about me and uses it mercilessly when scheduling shifts. He smiled then, the first real one she had seen from him, and it changed his whole face. It made him look younger and less like a person carrying a private weight. And Emma thought it was a shame he did not do it more often. He came back the week after that, and the week after that. By the 5th visit, Emma had stopped pretending to herself that she did not look for him during slow hours. And by the 6th visit, Patrice had started making pointed comments about young men who came to diners specifically during Emma's closing shifts, When Ted was also on and could have served them just as well. Not interested in his money, Emma told her grandmother. "I didn't say anything about money," Patrice said, and went back to her gravy with a small, satisfied expression that Emma found deeply irritating. The problem was that Cole was not like anyone Emma had spent real time with. He listened the way few people listened, fully and without agenda. And he asked questions about her nursing school plans that were specific and curious rather than politely dismissive. He told her about his work in broad strokes without bragging, and she got the impression that he was someone who had spent so long in rooms full of people performing their ambitions that plain conversation felt like water after years of drinking. Something else, she did not know his last name. She did not think to search for it. Then on a Friday morning, 3 weeks after his first visit, Patrice called Emma into the small office behind the kitchen with an expression that meant something serious had happened. She sat Emma down and set her tablet on the desk, opened to a news article, and said nothing. The headline read, "Cole Prescott, CEO of Prescott Holdings, spotted an unknown diner on Meridian Street." Below it was a photograph taken through the diner window. Grainy and slightly out of focus, but unmistakably Cole at his usual booth, and Emma in her faded blue uniform laughing at something he had said. Emma read the article. Prescott Holdings was one of the largest private investment firms in the country. Cole Prescott was 32 years old and worth, according to the article, somewhere in the range of $4 billion. His engagement to Vivian Shaw, daughter of the Shaw family who sat on his board, had ended publicly 6 weeks ago. The article speculated cheerfully about the identity of the woman in the photograph. Emma sat very still. She thought about every conversation they had ever had. She thought about the way he had said his name was just Cole, and the way she had never asked further, and the way she had felt talking to him, which was the feeling of being genuinely met by another person, something she had rarely experienced. And underneath all of that, rising slowly like water through a crack in a floor, was the feeling of being made into something smaller than she was. Not by malice, but by the simple fact that he had known the difference between them from the very first night, and she had not. When Cole came in that Saturday night, Emma was behind the counter with her back straight and her face carefully neutral. He sat down. She brought coffee. She did not sit across from him, she said. It was not a question. He looked at her steadily. "I was going to tell you." "When?" He was quiet for a moment. "I kept trying to find the right time, and then I convinced myself it didn't matter because you weren't treating me like Cole Prescott, and I didn't want that to change." He paused. "That was selfish of me. I'm sorry." Emma had prepared for several versions of this conversation, but not for an apology delivered that directly and that quietly. It landed differently than she expected. "It did matter," she said, "because I was making choices about you with incomplete information. That's not fair." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." She refilled his coffee, even though it was still nearly full, because she needed something to do with her hands. "I need you to understand something about me," she said. "I am not impressed by money. I have seen what it does to people, and I have watched it make them lonely and stupid and mean. And the thing I valued about talking to you was that you seemed like someone who had figured out that it wasn't the point. But if it turns out you were just performing that because you wanted someone to see past it without actually being honest with them, then you're exactly what I thought you weren't." Cole was quiet for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Rain tapped at the window. "You're right," he said finally. "All of that is right." She looked at him. He looked back, and there was no performance in his expression, no calculation. Just a person being seen clearly and choosing not to look away from it. "Then I need some time," Emma said. "To think." "Okay," he said. He drank his coffee. He left a normal tip. He did not push her. But the week Emma spent thinking was not peaceful. She threw herself into her nursing school application, which was due in 3 weeks, and worked extra shifts, and helped Patrice repaint the back hallway on her day off. And all of it was good and purposeful, and still, her mind kept returning to the booth by the window, and the man who had said she was right, with the steadiness of someone who genuinely meant it. On Wednesday, she got a call from a number she did not recognize. When she answered, A woman's voice informed her that she was speaking with the office of Prescott Holdings and that Emma Calloway had been identified as a candidate for a newly created coordinator position in their community outreach department, offering a salary that made Emma's breath stop for a full 3 seconds. She hung up. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. Then she put on her coat and walked to the address she found online for Prescott Holdings and stood at the front desk of a lobby that had more square footage than Silver Creek Diner and asked to see Cole Prescott. Woman at the desk looked at her with polite skepticism. Emma did not blink. Cole appeared 12 minutes later. When he saw her face, he looked like a man who already knew he had made a mistake and was bracing for the confirmation. You called my job," Emma said quietly, because she was not going to make a scene in his lobby. "I wanted to help you," he said. "I know you did," she said. "And that is the problem. Because I am building something. I am building it slowly and on my own terms, and every dollar of it is mine. And when you do something like this, you take that away from me. You turn me into someone who needs rescuing, and I am not that person." "I know," Cole said, and he looked genuinely stricken. "Emma, I know. I handled it badly. You handled it like a man who is used to solving problems with resources," she said. "And I am not a problem." "No," he said softly. "You're not. You're the only uncomplicated thing in my life, and I went and complicated it." She looked at him for a long moment. He stood in the center of his own lobby, looking less like a $4 billion CEO and more like someone who was afraid of losing something he had not been careful enough with. She thought about Patrice's face when she talked about bravery. She thought about the refrigerator hum and the booth by the window and the way he listened. "Cancel the job offer," she said. "Already done," he said. She nodded once. "I have a nursing school application to finish," she said. "And when it's submitted, I will let you know." She walked back out into the afternoon and she did not look back, but she was smiling by the time she reached the street, and she did not entirely understand why. Emma submitted her nursing school application on a Thursday evening at 7:43. Sitting at Patrice's kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold beside her laptop, she hit send and sat back and felt the particular silence that follows a thing you have been working toward for a long time. Patrice came in from the garden with dirt on her gloves and looked at Emma's face. "Did you send it?" "I sent it." Patrice pulled off her gloves and sat down across from her granddaughter and took both her hands in her warm, capable ones. "I am proud of you," she said simply. "Whatever happens next, I am so proud of you." Emma squeezed her hands back and then took a breath and picked up her phone. She texted Cole one sentence. "Application submitted." His response came in under a minute. "That calls for biscuits." She laughed. The laugh surprised her with how clean it felt. They met at Silver Creek the following Saturday. But not during Emma's shift. She sat on the customer side of the counter for the first time in 2 years, which felt strange and also quietly significant. Cole was already there when she arrived in the booth by the window, and Ted was behind the counter, covering the floor. Cole had 2 coffees waiting, and a look on his face that was trying to be casual and not quite managing it. Emma sat down across from him, wrapped her hands around the coffee cup and said, "I want to say something before anything else." "Okay," he said. "I don't need to be taken care of," she said. "I have spent my whole life building toward something real, and I do not want a person beside me who sees that work as something to shortcut or supplement or improve with his credit card. What I want, if I want anything, is someone who stands next to the thing I'm building and thinks it's worth building. Someone who respects that the slow way is the right way for me." Cole nodded slowly. "I hear that," he said, "and I want to tell you something back. Go ahead." "I have been in rooms full of people my entire adult life," he said, "and I have been genuinely alone for most of it. Not lonely in a dramatic way, just alone in the way that people who are surrounded by performance are always alone." He looked at his coffee cup and then at her. "The night I walked into this diner, I had just been publicly humiliated by a woman who was marrying my net worth rather than me. And I had mostly known that for 2 years before it happened. And the reason I stayed was not love but habit and the approval of a board of directors and a mother who thinks. Relationships are mergers. He paused. And then I sat in this booth, and a woman brought me biscuits I didn't order because she thought I could use something sweet, and spoke to me like I was a regular human being. And I walked out into the rain thinking that was the realest thing that had happened to me in years. Emma said nothing for a moment. The diner was quiet. Ted was restocking the napkin dispensers with his back turned in the way that suggested he was very carefully not listening. I handled the job offer badly, Cole continued. I know that. I got scared that you were going to disappear, and I acted like a person who thinks money is a solution. Which is the exact thing you said you didn't want, and the exact thing I was trying not to be with you. I'm sorry, genuinely. I know, Emma said. I already forgave you for it. I just needed you to understand why it mattered. Something in his shoulders dropped, the way a person's does when they have been holding tension without realizing it. Then the door opened, and Diana Prescott walked in. Emma had not known Cole's mother was in the city. Cole clearly had not either, because the slight stillness that came over his face told her this was not planned. Diana was in her early 60s, immaculate in a way that required considerable effort, with the kind of posture that had been cultivated to communicate that rooms belonged to her upon entry. She took in Silver Creek Diner with a single glance, and then looked at her son, and then at Emma, with pale eyes that missed nothing. Cole, she said pleasantly, I heard you were here. Mother, he said, and his voice was even. This is Emma Calloway. Diana looked at Emma for a long, assessing moment. Emma did not drop her gaze and did not smile with the automatic apology that people sometimes produced. When meeting someone who was looking at them like a problem, I see, Diana said. Sit down if you want coffee, Cole said. But I want to be clear about something first. He looked at his mother with a steadiness Emma had not seen from him before. Something that had been building quietly under the surface of all those midnight conversations. This is not a discussion I'm going to have in two separate conversations, one with you and one with Emma. Whatever you have to say, you can say here. Diana regarded her son for a moment. Then she sat down, with the precise and controlled movements of a woman who was recalibrating. I came to tell you, she said carefully, that Vivian Shaw has been speaking to the board. She is suggesting that your judgment has become unreliable since the engagement ended. There are people who will use your personal life to move against you professionally. She paused. I thought you should know. Thank you, Cole said. I'll handle the board. You need to be careful. I will be, he said. And I need you to understand that Emma is not a liability in my life. She is the reason my judgment has been clearer in the last 2 months than it has been in years. He looked at his mother steadily. I would like you to know her, not approve of her. Know her. Diana looked at Emma again. This time the assessment was different, slower. Less like cataloging and more like actual looking, Emma said. I'm applying to the nursing program at Riverside Community College. I've worked here for 2 years. My grandmother owns this diner, and she taught me that how you treat the people in front of you is more important than what is in your bank account. She kept her voice calm and clear. I'm not going to compete with anyone for a place in Cole's life. Either it's freely given, or it isn't worth. Having silenced, Patrice emerged from the back at that exact moment, with a fresh pot of coffee and a plate of biscuits that she set on the table with perfect, unhurried timing, as though she had been listening through the kitchen wall, which she absolutely had been. She filled all 3 cups and went back without a word. Diana looked at the biscuits. Then she looked at Cole. Then, with something that was not quite a smile, but was in the general vicinity of one, she picked up a biscuit and said, She seems capable of handling you. Cole looked at Emma. Emma looked at Cole. Something passed between them that required no words. 3 weeks later, Emma received her acceptance letter from Riverside Community College. She was in the break room at Silver Creek when it came through on her phone, and she stood very still reading it twice before she made a sound, which was not really a word. More a breath that had been waiting a long time to come out. She called Patrice first. Patrice cried, which she would later deny. She called Cole second. He said, I knew it, with a warmth in his voice that made her eyes sting. I want to celebrate, she said. Somewhere simple. Not expensive. There's a park near the river, he said. Sunset at 7. I'll bring food. brought a picnic, sandwiches and fruit, and a thermos of decent coffee. And they sat on a blanket while the river caught the last light of the evening and turned it gold. Emma leaned against his shoulder, and he rested his cheek against her hair, and they were quiet in the comfortable way of two people who had earned the quiet between them. "I want to tell you something," Cole said after a while. "Tell me." "When I walked into your diner, I thought I was just looking for somewhere dry to sit," he said quietly. "I had no idea I was looking for the most important thing that was ever going to happen to me." Emma lifted her head and looked at him. At the gray eyes that had been doing calculations the first night she met him, and were now doing something else entirely. Something softer and more permanent. She reached up and wiped a smear of mustard from the corner of his mouth, which broke the seriousness of the moment completely. And he laughed and pulled her close and kissed her temple, and the river kept moving, and the sky turned from gold to rose to the first deep blue of evening. And Emma Calloway thought about $4,000 growing slowly into a life, and a man who had learned to stop solving things and start being present for them. And the particular grace of two people finding each other in an ordinary place at an extraordinary hour. She pressed her face into his shoulder and felt something settle inside her. Quiet and complete and entirely her own, she had built this. Not quickly. Not with anyone else's money or approval or plan. She had built it with patience and honesty and the knowledge that some things only came to people who were willing to wait for what was real. Everything worth keeping, Patrice had told her once, takes longer than you think it should. Emma held on to. Cole in the gathering dark beside the river and thought her grandmother was, as usual, exactly right.